And if you're in the world of banking and finance and mortgaging, you certainly have an insight into what some of these are likely to do for you. Of all the ones you'll see here, certainly one that's most widely used, and not necessarily by people in that industry at all, is one that allows us to calculate the monthly or yearly or quarterly interest on a loan. And in cells A1 and A2 are two typical kinds of scenarios. The first one, someone needs to borrow some money for a car, say $25,000, wants to pay it off over 4 years, has an interest rate of 6%. I put this information into cells here just as pure entries right here. And here, I want to show how the PMT function works. It's pretty straightforward. Equal PMT, meaning payment. What's the rate? Now, the one mistake that is likely to be made if you make a mistake in using this function is you'll forget to divide this by 12. Now, of course, it isn't always 12. 12 means how many payments do you have per year? Or better yet, what is the interest rate per payment period? If these are quarterly payments, you would divide by 4, but if it's monthly, fairly much more common, /12. Don't forget to put that in there. Comma, NPER, the number of periods. If this is a 4-year loan, we could have put 48 in here, or since we do have the 4 here, simply this times 12 to indicate how many payments we've got, comma, and how much are we borrowing? Present value, $25,000. That's it. Our monthly payment, principal and interest, will be this amount. If you want to plug this into your family budget, it may be a bit awkward because it is displayed as a negative, and after all, it is an outflow of money every month, so that's an appropriate entry. But if you want to work differently with this, you have two options. You can either put a minus sign in front of the 25,000, or perhaps better, back in the function itself, simply precede that PV entry with a minus, if you want to have this displayed as a positive entry. Now you might also want to take this and build an amortization table. And for your information, Excel does have a built-in template for that. You can go to the Office button and choose New and track that down if you wish. That may be to your liking. If you want to build your own, I just want to show you the beginnings of it. The key entry here will be how much interest you pay the very first month. And so month by month, and you might have 48 entries here eventually, you want to know for each payment, how much principal, how much interest, and then the new balance each month. Some people find this exercise a little depressing, but let's say we don't, and let's talk about how we might do this. The interest rate for the very first month will be equal to the loan amount times the borrowed rate divided by 12. Now the principal is going to be the monthly payment minus this. And if we're thinking of how this is going to be copied down the column, as we put in the principal, we want to be using cell D7 and make it absolute. And that's always going to be that minus the interest for the month. So these two together add up to the monthly payment of $587.13, and the balance each month is reduced by the amount of the principal. So here's the balance minus the principal. You would probably want to do one more just to make sure you've got it right. So the next entry down here, remember here on the principal, we were doing what? We were subtracting it from the interest. Now, you could bring this down first. It'll look funny because we didn't calculate the interest. But what do we want to do on the interest here? Every month from now on, we want to be basing the interest on the balance this way. Probably what I should have done here, and I could readjust it on this first case here, is simply say, instead of that referring to D6, make it refer to this value right here. So it's referring to the cell that's over and up one. And that means if we drag this down, this should be working okay. One more adjustment, the D4 reference should be absolute. Drag that down. And since this was a subtraction in that order, same idea here, we could build our table this way. So dragging this down, eventually we'd see and drag it to whatever it's going to be down here. And eventually you'll see what's happening. And I didn't quite complete this. We could drag it down this way. We'd have to drag it down into row 48 to make this work properly, but it wouldn't. I'd say a few rows beyond that, and it will end up at 0 eventually, right at 48. So it's easy to build and fast. Now, with a loan for a house, things are going to be a bit different, well, substantially different. Another variation on what you might use PMT for, and we could do it here in a different way. sometimes you're in an exploratory mood, and so you could build a little grid here using PMT. In the example here, maybe you're exploring different possibilities as to how much you want to borrow, depends on the market, of course, and what are the interest rates. So a quick idea here in building this using the PMT function, this example, what we'd like to do, and let's say that in all cases here, it's going to be a 30-year, 360-month kind of situation. So we start off here with the rate, and looking ahead, since every entry in this grid will need to get its entries out of row 1, we'll use the F4 key here to make sure the reference there stays frozen in row 1, a mixed reference with an absolute reference for the row number. So that's going to be the rate divided by 12, comma. The constant here will be the 360 right here, and we want to hit F4 there, so that's going to stay constant for all these, comma, and the amount we're borrowing will vary, but it's always going to come out of column I here, so we will want to press F4 a few times so that the reference stays in column I. You want the dollar sign in front of the I, comma, and we're done. And there too, if you want that to be expressed as a positive number, I think it would be better in this case, we'll put a negative in front of this, and then copy it downward, and copy it across to see the various rates depending upon the interest and the amount being borrowed. And do keep in mind, of course, that with a house, the payment we're seeing here is principal plus interest. We are not talking about insurance and taxes. And you might want to add those onto the end of this or simply use this as your starting point. So there's no question that PMT has a role to play and it's absolutely vital, as you would imagine in mortgage and banking, but it is widely used outside of that. It's one of the more popular functions in Excel not used for work purposes.